afternoon, everyone. My name is Eileen Pollis. I'm a librarian here at the Long Beach Public Library. And I'd like to welcome you today to our 100th anniversary or the centennial of the city of Long Beach. And we have a special treat today in store for you. We have Joanne Belli from the Long Beach Historical Society. And I have here next to me, oh my God, without further ado, Senator William H. Reynolds. More. And played by Barry Rivadue, who has been graciously given us this opportunity to have him come to the library and to be a part of our program today. I'm very grateful for having you both. And Tom, thank you so much for helping. We're in good everything from you. Thank you, Adesh, and all the people who have helped us with this program today. Without further ado, Joanne Belli is going to be doing our presentation. We know that we're on Zoom live today, and it's going to be recorded. So at some point in another week or so, Tom will have this uploaded to the library's website, and you'll be able to share that YouTube through the library's website at any time, so you can pass it on to your friends. So without further ado, Joanna, Senator Reynolds, thank you for joining us.
Before I begin the presentation, I wrote a little introductory note also. First of all, I want to say many thanks to Eileen Pollis and the Long Beach Public Library for extending today's invitation to me to talk about one of my favorite historical characters, Senator William H. Reynolds. While I was researching my book on the Lido Club Hotel, Senator Reynolds' life story began to fascinate me. As the Long Beach Historical Society archivist, I have had the opportunity to learn more about the good senator and piece together his amazing life. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joanne Belli. I'm a retired teacher. I wrote my first book, Images of the Lido Club Hotel, in May 2020. Several of my presentations are available on YouTube about that book, and my book is available at the gift shop at the Long Beach Historical Society. My very first book presentation was a Zoom presentation that Eileen guided me through, and Tom, at the Long Beach Library as part of Eileen's local history series, which began during COVID. If you missed any of them or some of them, you can see them all on YouTube. They're fascinating. Since writing my book, I have become a trustee of the Long Beach Historical Society and their archivist. I welcome you to visit the museum and the archives, learn about your local history, and perhaps become a member and join a committee. Special thanks to Eileen Pollis for generously sharing her historical knowledge and research with me. Now on to the senator.
Do you want the lights out?
Doesn't make any difference to me. I think I'm okay. So here, the slides will show there are 42 slides, and Senator Reynolds will speak, and then we'll have a question and answer period. All right, and as long as the computer cooperates with me, I think I'll be okay. So Senator H. Reynolds was born in a leap year on February 29th, 1868. As a leapling, he had to wait 4 years for his official birthday. However, Reynolds, known to many as Billy, lived his life as if every day was his birthday. He partied late into the night, drank heavily and often, had a lifelong penchant for beautiful women, and was a heavy gambler. He gambled in cards, on the horses, and was always making bets with his friends and enemies. This proclivity for gambling was just as outrageous in his business dealings. Reynolds primarily was a land speculator and was always taking risks. He was involved in many projects at once, often overextended financially. Reynolds' modus operandi was to work with other people's money. Reynolds was a talented, we went to slide 5. Reynolds was a talented and seasoned salesman with the gift of gab, an orator, and most definitely a doer and a dreamer. His story begins 39 years before he arrived in Long Beach. Reynolds was born in Brooklyn in a brownstone built by his father in the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. The Williamsburg section was on Madison Street between Reed and Stuyvesant Avenues. According to Paul Jackson, in his book Scoundrel by the Seas, unfortunately it's out of print, but you should try to get your hand on it. Eileen, does the library have it?
Yes. We got a
Okay. The exact address is 688 Madison Street. Reynolds' father, the senior Reynolds, was a small-time builder. He came from Exeter in Devonshire, England. Reynolds' mom, Margaret McChesney Reynolds, was American-born of Irish-Scottish descent. Margaret was a widow. Her husband died in the Civil War. She came to the Reynolds marriage with children in tow. Both Margaret and the senior Mr. Reynolds were very frugal. To save money, Reynolds Sr. would often move his family into one of his almost finished, often unheated houses. When the house was completed and sold, the family would then be moved out. So young Reynolds found himself moving in and out of almost finished houses every month or two. He never had time to establish roots in any one house long enough to call it home. Perhaps that's why Reynolds preferred yachts to houses. Based on Reynolds' unauthorized anonymous biography, Doer of Dreams, he was a very devoted son. He would kneel on the floor before his mother every morning and lace up her shoes, as his mom had arthritis, which was exacerbated by living in unheated houses. Reynolds attended PS 35 in Brooklyn. He attended Sunday school and high school, where he became very attracted to the opposite sex, and that interest only grew throughout his lifetime. Reynolds was always a wheeler dealer. At the age of 6, he talked young friends into a trade in which he acquired a diamond ring, which he made sure he wore when a professional photograph was taken of him. As a teenager, he realized that he could make money by getting payments earlier to his dad's creditors. He charged them 2% extra and quickly accrued $40,000, which he then risked and lost in the stock market. Reynolds traveled west for a while looking for opportunity, almost got shot, but soon decided to focus on New York real estate. He dabbled in New York politics and developed many lifelong political connections. After high school, Reynolds decided to study law at NYU, but did not finish his degree. Instead, he opened a real estate office on Lafayette and Reed Street in Brooklyn. Before coming to Long Beach, Reynolds built many communities in Brooklyn, including Borough Park, Bensonhurst, Easton Parkway, and Bed-Stuy. He also built the village of Laurelton in Queens, the magnificent Dreamland amusement park in Coney Island, and the Jamaica racetrack. During these prolific real estate years, he was also dabbling in gold and silver and oil out west. This portrait of Senator William Reynolds hangs in the entrance hall of the Long Beach Historical Society Museum. Thanks to Roberta, it's there. The portrait was given to Roberta by Senator Reynolds' only granddaughter, Peggy Ellis Footeron. Here, Reynolds is portrayed as a handsome young man, probably in his 20s. He was an impeccable dresser. I've been told that he never wore the same shirt twice. And he was clearly a man about town. He worked hard and he partied hard. A chapter from Reynolds' unauthorized anonymous biography recounts a party in Reynolds' suite in Coney Island near his amazing Dreamland amusement park, where Reynolds' pet lion cub, affectionately named the Senator, given to him by the Dreamland animal trainer, Jack Bostock, got loose after a night of heavy drinking and came after Reynolds' guests. Reynolds, feeling no pain, held up the chair and pushed the cub into a corner. His guests included Diamond Jim Brady and Alfred E. Smith, and both were paralyzed with fear. Reynolds was a theater owner. He owned the Montauk Theater, and he was enamored with the theater crowd. He first saw Elise de Beaufort-Gourrière, pictured here, an actress from Boston, a member of the Boston Opera Company, in 1892 at the New York Academy of Music on 14th Street in New York City. Elise was on the stage performing in The Black Crook, a musical of the time. She was considered an unrivaled beauty. Reynolds was immediately smitten, although he knew he was not and would never be a one-woman man. He courted Elise, and they were married shortly thereafter on May 1st, 1893. Reynolds built a magnificent mansion for his family on Eastern Parkway and Underhill Boulevard in Brooklyn. Elise played the harp beautifully and made an excellent, elegant hostess for Reynolds. They had two daughters together, Margaret and Marie. They were married till Reynolds' death, but were estranged. The museum, in keeping with the Reynolds estrangement, does not hang Elise's portrait next to her husband's. They are in separate rooms. I think that's the way she would have wanted it. This real estate advertisement shown here provides a concise description of Reynolds' pre-Long Beach real estate development. This brownstone is located in the Prospect Heights Historic District. It is one of the row houses built by Reynolds in 1901 in a stretch of Sterling Place between Underhill and Washington Avenues. In this 2020 ad, this is listed for 3.6 million. I'm sure it's probably 5 or 6 million now. The ad goes on to read, "This house at 382 Sterling Place and 32 others on the block were the work of one of the Brooklyn's busiest developers, William H. Reynolds, a senator, a museum park owner, a developer, and a convicted swindler. After buying up land in Prospect Heights in 1890s, he began developing the lots with row houses, many in Romanesque and Renaissance Revival style. Reynolds employed a number of architects for his various projects, including Benjamin Dreisler, who was responsible for the Sterling Place houses, as well as a staggering number of others across the borough. Here he designed a stretch of brownstones that have a mix of flat facades, rounded angled bays, foliate ornament, and arched windows, but are all unified with a consistent 3-story height and ornamental metal cornices. This is a picture of Dreamland in Coney Island. Dreamland's story centers on the vision and ambition of this rather wily founder, William Reynolds, who in 1904 embarked on the quest to develop the best amusement park in Coney Island. Reynolds designed Dreamland specifically to compete with Luna Park and spared no expense, taking advantage of the amusement park investment craze that was in full swing globally. Investors poured millions of dollars into Dreamland. Reynolds initially reinvested all of the park's receipts, believing that Dreamland's triumph over Luna Park was just one more hit attraction away. Dreamland copied Luna Park's most popular rides, purchased rights to the most popular attractions exhibited at World's Fairs, and hired away some of Luna's star performers. Unfortunately, despite the millions poured into Dreamland, it was unsuccessful. And by 1910, Reynolds was ready to close the park and recapture some of his investment by selling the land to the city of New York for a hefty profit. Reynolds was very good at doing that. Interestingly, Dreamland burned to the ground in 1911 while negotiations were going on. This is Bostock's menagerie in the picture, the Jack Bostock I mentioned that gave the senator the pet cub. Here is Reynolds aboard his last yacht, the Daydream. Reynolds partied and conducted business aboard his yacht in its lavish staterooms. Reynolds traveled near and far on his many yachts. When on land, Reynolds most always conducted business, according to his unauthorized biography, sitting in a rocking chair. Perhaps his overactive mind, filled with his endless business dealings and schemes, was soothed by the movement of a rocking chair and or the lulling on the seas. This photograph was given to me by Mark Fuderin, Senator Reynolds' great-grandson, who I believe is listening today via Zoom and hopefully will share some interesting stories when we get to the Q&A. This house is located in the Quads, 2 blocks north of the Lido Hotel. The Quads were unique houses built by Senator Reynolds in the early 1920s. They were built as housing for his golf course management and special guests. These houses are unique in that the Quads are 16 homes built in 4 sets of 4 houses, each sharing a side and back wall with its immediate neighbor. Reynolds bought one of these houses for his younger daughter, Marie, and her husband, Russell Ellis. Elise Reynolds, the senator's estranged wife, lived there with her daughter, Marie, Russell, her son-in-law, and Peggy, her only granddaughter. Reynolds kept a suite at the Nassau Hotel and also had an apartment in Manhattan. And he also very often visited Long Beach houses, which he bought for female friends. Are you hiding there? I think it's part of your charm, Senator Reynolds. Reynolds loved his dogs and would often be seen walking Tiger, in the left in this image, on the boardwalk. This photo was shared also by Reynolds' great-grandson, Mark Fuderin, who has visited Long Beach on several occasions. He came for the outdoor presentation of my book on the Lido Club Hotel in September 2020. Tiger and Queenie, both pictured here, were pampered and treated royally. Notice the diamond collar on Queenie. This photo hung in the salon of Reynolds' yacht. One story that combines Reynolds' love of canines and his pervasive gambling is said to have taken place in Europe. Reynolds was sitting in a cafe, spotted a magnificent canine, immediately asked the owner to sell him. The owner refused. Reynolds, always relentless, made a bet that if the dog came to him when he called, the owner would let him have the dog. Reynolds ended up on one of his transatlantic voyages coming home from Europe with that dog in tow. A Bayview area near Avenue near Cobble Villa, now known as Villa Clara, which is in jeopardy of being knocked down, is on Laurelton Boulevard with Senator Reynolds' channel in the background, and Reynolds' yacht might be the background for this picture. Here is Senator Reynolds aboard his yacht with his wife, Elise. Reynolds adored his daughters and probably loved his wife, but his lifestyle, and his compulsive womanizing did not make for a happy marriage. Reynolds was very attracted to beautiful women. The fact that the other women were married apparently made little difference. In 1914, Reynolds, who was a close political and personal friend of the young mayor of New York City, John Peroy Mitchell, was returning by car from shooting practice in Croton with the mayor and his beautiful young wife, Olive. Reynolds was in the back seat of Mitchell's car with Olive. Mitchell was driving. Reynolds was making a very amorous overture to Olive. The rear view mirror had just come into fashion, and the mayor in the front seat spotted what was going on in his back seat. When Mayor Mitchell exited the car, he said his gun fell and fired an accidental shot in Reynolds' groin and through his left hand. The New York Times reported the shooting as accidental, but in Reynolds' anonymous biography, but shooting is treated as no accident. Ouch. Here's the senator and Elise relaxing on canvas beach chairs. I can't tell, it could be at Lido. Reynolds was a master builder, a master salesman, and a master dreamer who had all the necessary skills to make his real estate dreams a reality. After a long, successful career as a land developer and builder in Brooklyn, and as the youngest New York State senator to have ever served, at age 40, Reynolds, or nearing 40, Reynolds turned his eyes to our Long Beach barrier island. Reynolds stepped onto Long Beach for the first time in 1906. His friend and business partner, Frank Bailey, president of the Brooklyn Trust and Guarantee Company, had heard that Long Beach was for sale and encouraged Reynolds to go take a look. Reynolds was reportedly mesmerized by the barrier island. Holding its fine, pure sand in his hand, he realized the possibilities. This somewhat romantic version may in part be true, but it also seems that Reynolds' speculative business antenna were in high gear because he had heard that New York City was looking to purchase the southwestern section of Long Beach, including the magnificent Long Beach Hotel, originally built in 1880, to create a sanitarium for their poor New York City residents. Reynolds thought he could quickly purchase the barrier island and then flip it to the city, making a quick profit. Reynolds had a history of flipping and selling land to the city for huge profits. With that possibility in mind, he established initial financial interest in Long Beach property in 1906, purchasing over 1,000 acres on the southwestern part of Long Beach, including the Long Beach Hotel and its cottages. Unfortunately, the New York City deal went sour, in part because William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper mogul, who was Reynolds' arch enemy due to a long time standing disagreement about a woman and politics, made sure the plan to sell Long Beach to New York City was squashed. Reynolds was undeterred and now developed a plan B for Long Beach. He would create a bigger, better Atlantic City, a resort for the rich and famous on our barrier island. He immediately sought to buy the remaining part of the barrier island, mostly marshes, from the town of Hempstead. Reynolds was always eyeing prospective investors for his real estate projects. He sold property and stock so that Long Beach could become the Riviera of the East. Here in this early 1900s photo, taken from Roberta's book on Long Beach, are from left to right, Nassau National Bank of Brooklyn President Thomas T. Barr, Jacob Klipstein, Senator Reynolds, Teddy Roosevelt, and Long Beach Hotel manager Cal Dick. Always cultivating wealthy businessmen, he even went to Europe to entice financiers to invest in his Long Beach dream. This map, part of the museum's permanent exhibit, shows Reynolds' original purchase. You could see it on the bottom here, and the railroad would go here. This is the area that Reynolds initially purchased. And he purchased it, it was the Long Beach Hotel and the 1,028 acres along the ocean in the southwestern section of Long Beach. The additional Long Beach 1,084 acres was still owned by the town of Hempstead and was mostly marshland. For example, the area where our present-day Long Island Railroad Station is was under 18 feet of water and was a fabulous area for flounder fishing. Reynolds literally changed the topography of Long Beach by masterminding an incredible dredging project. This is Reynolds' initial request to purchase the remaining Long Beach acreage from the town of Hempstead. It was approved in April 1907. In November 1909, he again successfully petitioned the town of Hempstead to purchase the area of Point Lookout. Reynolds used his persuasive skills to petition the town of Hempstead, convincing them that if they sold him this Long Beach marshland, he would raise the land above sea level, then develop it, and create a community that would increase town of Hempstead's real estate tax base. Now, as owner of the additional marshland from the town of Hempstead and president of the Long Beach Development Company, Reynolds formalized his plan to dredge South Hempstead Bay and create Reynolds Channel. Reynolds hired the largest dredging company in the country, the Atlantic and Pacific Dredging Company, the same one used for the Panama Canal. 320 men worked around the clock, and approximately 250 million cubic yards of sand was dredged. And I understand from several sources that after the Panama Canal, this was the second largest dredging project in the country. Here you can see the dunes and the marshes and the manpower, ingenuity, foresight, and determination it took to create our Long Beach Barrier Island. These are the pipes, if you could see them on the right upper, pumping sand to fill in the marshland. For those of you who watched the Army Corps of Engineers at work a few years ago, the process has not changed dramatically. The channel was dredged, renamed Reynolds Channel, and the marshland was filled, some areas to 9 feet above sea level. Reynolds' experience building communities in Brooklyn and his political and financial connections, combined with his willingness to take a chance, created the perfect dynamic for the early development of Long Beach. His team of salesmen, his skill in advertising, and his engagement of Charles W. Levitt Jr., an accomplished city planner, led to the creation of this magnificent village. A rectilinear grid with wide grassy malls planted with salt air tolerant flower beds was created. Reynolds hired Joseph P. Day, a well-known auctioneer who is still in business in New York City today, to sell his lots. He also organized a strong team of Long Beach salesmen that quickly became a fraternity, and he was a member. The magnificent Queen Anne style Long Beach Hotel I mentioned earlier, built in 1880, bought by Reynolds, burned to the ground on July 27th, 1907, just a few months after Reynolds purchased it. Its only surviving structure, pictured here, was its chimney. Reynolds, however, was undeterred, and in June 1908, ground was broken for the Nassau Hotel, and the following June 19th, 1909, the Nassau opened. Reynolds was relentless and driven. Reynolds was a showman. When building the boardwalk, he bought 2 elephants from his Dreamland menagerie to Long Beach to move some lumber for a photo shoot. The elephants, Roger and Alice, are famously remembered for their part in the successful publicity stunt. Construction on the boardwalk was initiated in 1907. It was originally planned to be 5.5 miles long, just like the one in Atlantic City, but only 2.25 miles were built. The boardwalk was 50 feet wide and cost about $136,000 per mile. It is hard to know on maps and newspaper ads of this early Long Beach era, and we have this all the time in the archives, just what was really built and what was still in Reynolds' head. Reynolds believed so strongly in his visions that to him they were reality, and he often put them on maps. By the way, Fodor recently announced that it selected our Long Beach boardwalk as the second best boardwalk in the country, with, I'm sure to Reynolds' dismay, Atlantic City being first. Reynolds was a master salesman, an accomplished orator, and a skilled writer. Above on the screen are 3 pages from a brochure he wrote, convincing potential buyers of Long Beach's value. This brochure is available in the Long Beach Archives, Long Beach Historical Society Archives, and we welcome you to come in and read it. Here is a photo of the original Long Beach City Hall. Long Beach became a village in 1913. Reynolds was its first president. He ruled with a heavy hand. According to Paul Jackson, Reynolds had a proprietary attitude toward Long Beach, and like most famous empire builders, found that normal legalities sometimes stood in the way of his plans. With the end of Reynolds' initial restrictive covenants, and I'll just briefly describe the covenants, many of them had to do with the fact that you had to have a certain amount of lots to build your beautiful villa in the estates on. They all had to have the red tile roofs, and you can see many of them still do. And a lot of them had to be painted white or a light colored stucco. And there were also, unfortunately, covenants at that time that had to do with excluding certain people from living in the areas here in Long Beach. But that quickly changed, and Long Beach Village was growing into in population and diversity. Reynolds felt that it would be best if Long Beach became a city, and that as a city, it might be easier for him to maintain control. So in 1922, he used his political connections in Albany to have Long Beach almost overnight officially become a city. Reynolds was Long Beach's first mayor. Unfortunately, as mayor, he was accused of misusing funds in the amount of $19,360. Reynolds was indicted in 1924. That June, loyal Long Beach residents from the Citizens and Taxpayers Association gathered at City Hall and stopped the clock there as a show of solidarity and support for Reynolds. The clock was restarted only when Reynolds was exonerated, and he was exonerated. Long Beach is one of 5 planned communities in New York State. It was laid out in grid pattern with brick paved streets. Long Beach was initially designed for the rich and famous, but after the war, Long Beach was becoming a middle-class, year-round community. Infrastructure was carefully being built, including schools, hospitals, and temples and churches. By 1918, Reynolds' Long Beach estate was bankrupt. His dream was saved by an infusion of cash from industrialist Irving Bush of Bush Terminal. Frank Bailey, Reynolds' longtime friend, the one who got him involved in Long Beach to begin with, tried to buy the estates out from under him. Reynolds never recovered from this betrayal. On April 13th, 1922, Long Beach officially became the city by the sea. By May 16th, 1922, the first election was held. It was highly contested, but Reynolds won and became mayor. And by June 1st, 1922, business officially began in the city. The museum just accessioned the original 1923 first-year city report. It is a fascinating read, and you're welcome to come up and see it. This is a photo of Reynolds on the beach with, we believe, the governor of New Jersey, Edward Edwards. The occasion was a beauty contest in Long Beach for the Miss America pageant. Lillian Harnack was selected Miss Long Beach circa 1920. Reynolds was about 54, surrounded by beautiful women. Reynolds was in his glory. I believe Lillian is either in the first row, the center, or the left part. I've matched it to other pictures of her in newspapers. And Reynolds is sitting there smoking a cigar, second row, second from the left. You could see him, I'm sure. Here you see the balding Reynolds sitting in his rocker, smoking a cigar. As I mentioned earlier, his unauthorized biography indicates that Reynolds always chose to sit in a rocking chair while conducting business. There you go. Senator Reynolds with his longtime friend and partner, Senator Patrick McCarran. McCarran was a longtime business partner of Reynolds and happened to be at the Long Beach Hotel along with Senator Reynolds on the night the Long Beach Hotel burned to the ground. Senator Reynolds and Senator McCarran traveled in the same social circles since the 1890s, and it's reported in many newspaper articles that Reynolds often helped McCarran out when his affairs of the heart got a little too complicated. Although Reynolds only served about a year in the New York State Senate, he kept his title of senator and his political connection for the rest of his life. Both served him well. Reynolds had a history of knowing just when to buy property that New York City would be interested in purchasing and turning a huge profit. Reynolds had flipped land on the Brooklyn side of the Manhattan Bridge to the city for a profit. He was involved in selling property to the Rockaways to the city for a huge profit, and he sold the land Dreamland was on to New York City for more than 3 times than it was assessed for. He was investigated, indicted, and exonerated. Reynolds often found it expedient to think about his profits rather than his principles. As mentioned earlier, Reynolds was hoping to flip Long Beach to the city of New York, but this deal didn't go through. When the deal didn't go through, Reynolds got dramatic, stood on the dunes holding his daughter Margaret's hand and explained to her that he was going to take this marshland and create an amazing city, bigger and better than Atlantic City. Reynolds depended on his salesman, pictured here, to handle the sale of many of his lots. He socialized with them, played softball with them, and interestingly and mysteriously left $250,000 to one of the salesmen, Jim Griffiths of Limbrook, pictured here, the third from the left. Whether Griffiths or anyone else other than the immediate family ever collected their inheritance is uncertain. The will was still being probated 20 years after Reynolds' death, well into the 1950s. The will is available in the Long Beach Historical Society archives. Reynolds owed a great deal of money at the time of his death and was being sued by one of his partners for mishandling $750,000 regarding the Lido Club Hotel property. Reynolds is here. He's the 5th in from the right without a hat. Did I just do that? Did I go backwards?
Yeah.
Okay. William Reynolds, July 22nd, 1926, top row, second from left, with his real estate salesman, said it was the hottest day of the year and the hottest day in 50 years. Reynolds was very interested in the selling of his lots. He had a flair for the dramatic. His sales pitch was clear and pointed. Here's a sample of one of his pitches. Real estate, like gems, to rise in value must be limited in quantity. Don't buy a building lot that can be duplicated 1 million times over. He felt that the property by the ocean was unique, in high demand, with limited availability, and therefore certain to increase. Reynolds was primarily and practically a land speculator. The end goal of his planned communities was to sell lots at a profit. Here you see over 2,000 people invited to a land auction held at the Lido Hotel before its completion. He strung lights on the construction and sold the idea of this amazing hotel and all its amenities, and gave a powerful pitch to people to buy the adjacent lots and become part of this unique resort community. Over the years, Reynolds' interest slowly moved east to Lido Beach. As early as 1913, he had a plan to build a magnificent golf course, of course, with other people's money. He convinced a wealthy syndicate, including Vanderbilt Jr., Otto Kahn, Payne Whitney, and other capitalists to buy land from him and finance the golf course. In addition, he offered them a land option to build a stately hotel adjacent to the course, but World War I got in the way and the hotel was never built, and the golf course didn't officially open till 1918. In the early 1920s, the syndicate lost interest in the golf course and it went into foreclosure. Reynolds held the second lien and the course reverted back to him. In 1925, at the height of a spectacular Long Beach real estate boom, Reynolds went ahead with his plan to build the magnificent Lido Club Hotel pictured here. This hotel's fascinating history can be explored in my book, The Lido Club Hotel, available at the Long Beach Historical Society Museum and Gift Shop. The hotel opened in 1928, just 3 years before Reynolds' death and 1 year before the stock market crash. Reynolds was always tall on ideas and short on cash. While he was building the Lido Hotel, he had a big project going on in Manhattan to build the world's largest skyscraper on the land where the Chrysler Building stands. The Chrysler Building would have been the Reynolds Building if Reynolds wasn't short on cash and hadn't sold the rights to his skyscraper dream to Walter Chrysler for $2 million with a handshake on the Lido golf course. Here is Reynolds in his mid to late 50s, and that didn't stop him. He became mayor of the city of Long Beach then, and then built the Lido Club Hotel. He remained active in business and land speculating, but some chronic health issues were taking their toll on his energy level. This is a photograph that would be used in several of his obituaries. On October 13th, 1931, at the age of 63, Reynolds died in his Manhattan apartment at 200 West 57th Street. He had asked for his wife to be by his side, and she was going to be there, but unfortunately, Reynolds passed before her arrival. Cause of death was thought to be respiratory issues. He was cremated, and services were held at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Manhattan. A wake attended beyond capacity was held at Campbell's Funeral Home in Manhattan on 66th Street and Broadway. Mayor Frankel, then mayor of Long Beach, and many Long Beach VIPs attended, as well as many New York City politicians, dignitaries, and businessmen. A half-day memorial took place in Long Beach so that citizens who loved him so here could properly express their grief. Reynolds' final resting place is at Greenwood Cemetery in, of course, Brooklyn. Many obituaries were printed in local and New York City newspapers. The New York Times dedicated an entire column to Reynolds' obituary, and time will permit, I will take a few minutes to share it with you. Perhaps the good Senator Reynolds would like the opportunity to read his own obituary. Even Reynolds would not have bet on that. Okay. This in the picture here, marked in the red, is an acrostic poem, and it was written to William Reynolds. I don't know if it's large enough for you to read, but an acrostic poem is a poem or composition where the first letter of each line spells out a particular name, word, or message. This acrostic poem is going to spell out William H. Reynolds. The acrostic poem spelling out William H. Reynolds was written by J.P. Delaney and was in a local Long Beach newspaper a few days following Reynolds' death. It is an interesting tribute to Reynolds, but the words, I warn you, are slightly archaic by today's standards and somewhat contrived. So it takes each of the letters of his name and starts each sentence with that. So it's W. Who was it found this naked, barren dune? I, isle of sand with ne'er a glimpse of green to greet the sea. L, long stretch of submerged reef where but the sea's sad tune, second L, lulled crustaceans' life in deep damp beds. Who would have thought, I ask, that this would ever become a booming place much sought, and a rendezvous for the nation's youth in search of play. Marvelous is the transformation one man, I say, and now his middle name, H, has made in a fleeting span of years. Myriad of homes, and now his last name. Reynolds, R, reared for humankind, Broad Street and lighted avenue. E, extend through lawns and foliaged trees abound. Y, yet this benefactor was much maligned by those who knew, and the N, not gratefulness and to their maker, 'tis the story old. O, of men who did and yet through life were given no reward, say I. L, let cavillers measure up with this man of deeds, well done. D, dross will be their paltry words compared to his real deeds of gold. And S, see herein the name we should emblazon on the clear cerulean sky, William H. Reynolds. In 1972, Long Beach's local publication, The Voice, wrote, older residents of Long Beach remember Reynolds as a small, bald-headed, friendly, jocular, but decisive man. He was considered a loyal, generous, and valuable friend. Socially, Reynolds was a party man. He was a happy drinker, a heavy gambler, and a man who never avoided the company of an attractive woman. Reynolds always referred to Long Beach as his baby, and at the time, the analogy was correct. In the 50th anniversary edition of Long Beach Voice, Reynolds is described as a mover, a swinger, a man of action, but most of all, an achiever. Reynolds embodies the American dream, a poor boy from Williamsburg who built cities, who associated with the rich and famous, and who became a millionaire in the process. Reynolds is a hero to the people of Long Beach, and they stood by him even at his darkest hour. In 2022, here now, on the 100th anniversary of this city, with an understanding of his shortcomings and his attributes, we renew our admiration for Senator William H. Reynolds. He is the father of Long Beach. I hope that a statue or marker will be erected finally to memorialize his importance to the barrier island. It was my pleasure to share Reynolds' story with you. I hope that this presentation has enhanced your understanding and appreciation of Senator Reynolds, the man, the dreamer, the doer, and the creator of Long Beach Barrier Island and the city of Long Beach. Before Senator Reynolds actually begins talking about his obituary, after I had finished the presentation and in the archives, I came across an article or flyer that was written by a gentleman named Louis Friedman, who lived at 321 East Olive in Long Beach. He was a real estate person who had an office on 1440 Broadway, and he was certainly enamored with Reynolds. This was written, and I'll read a little bit to you. In 1937, the mayor of Long Beach was Gold, who was really an opponent of Long Beach, but this gentleman had arranged with Mayor Gold for Mayor Gold to give space in City Hall so that a meeting could be held of all Long Beach residents, and they could plan a monument to Long Beach. Now, this never happened, and to Reynolds, rather, in Long Beach. To this day, he doesn't have a monument. I think this was in full gear in 1937, but in the election in 1937 was won by Mayor Edwards. And for those of you familiar with Long Beach history, Mayor Edwards was shot shortly thereafter. So I think that put the, it tempered down the idea. But I just wanted such devotion is amazing. I'm sure he was in the real estate business, and I'm sure that he had connections with Reynolds, but it says, Let us start with the accepted fact that Senator Reynolds founded the city of Long Beach. And I want to say that this is so small. I thank my ophthalmologist for my eyes that I actually had cataracts done. Otherwise, I never would be able to read this. Let us also accept the fact that it took a great visionary, a genius, to take a barren island such as this strip of land, survey it, build bulkheads and jetties, make a beach and plant trees, build sewers and water mains, himself build, and bring in builders and cooperate with them and build thereon a city of beauty such as the town is today. Now that he was describing this in 1937 with its proper railroad facilities. And then after completing that, not stopping, but building further, utilizing the land to the west and calling it the West End, and then to the east to build the Lido Hotel, the Lido Golf Course, and Point Lookout, and many other projects too numerous to mention. There are gold in them there mountains, said the slogans of the Western pioneers in the last century. There are gold in them there sands and waters of Long Beach must have been Reynolds' dream. And in his determination to do this big thing, some errors were made. Like every human being, he was subject to man's frailties and human traits. Every once in a while, he, like every other founder, was blamed for the errors and associates and assistants and others in charge. Please always bear in mind the colossal size of his undertakings. So I won't read further. You're welcome to see it. It's in the museum, in the Historical Society, but you can just, he certainly was enamored by many people, and rightly so, I believe. So thank you for attending, and if you would like to listen, thank you, to Senator Reynolds. He'll read his from his obituary from the New York Times.
Not the whole thing. I know my own story. Okay, well, that was the most flattering appraisal of my life. It was perfect, but I think I accomplished more than I ever thought I would.
And we certainly appreciate it.
Well, in fact, I always like hearing good things about myself. As part of the obituary, I'll add to what has been said to me. A lavish entertainer, an athlete, a yachtsman, and a good mixer. Senator Reynolds was also generous to charities. He gave without stint to the Lodge of Elks to which he belonged, and donated land for Long Beach Hospital and for the Catholic Church in Long Beach, even though he was not Catholic. He was a former president of the Long Beach Hospital Association and a Mason. Now, what interests me is when he created Greenland. Wouldn't we like to have such a place again? Because back then, where did people seek entertainment? Without radio, without movies, there were Edison cylinders, but that had limited appeal at that time. But if you went to Greenland, as the obituary says here, you would see these spectacles like fire and flames, creation, and trip to the moon. And it burned out. Now, one thing that was not mentioned in this that I think we should all be mindful of during the teens in Long Beach was castles by the sea. I'm certain Senator Reynolds probably was quite aware of this place. Irene and Vernon Castle. Their stay at the pavilion was rather brief, but I think 100 years on, we can still appreciate the standard they set for ballroom dancing. As it is, Reynolds had the largest dance hall in the vicinity. Now, it's good to be back after 100 years, if temporarily. If you would like to visit me,
Could you speak a little louder? They can't hear you, Senator.
I'll start from the beginning. Okay, well, if you would like to visit me in my more or less permanent state, I'm over in, where am I? I'm in Greenwood Cemetery. Up on. And whatever it is that you'd like to say more about me, I will appreciate it, because what would Long Beach be if I didn't show up in the first place.
They wouldn't exist.
How many people can say they created something literally just out of sand and sea, and we still have it? And if you go around Long Beach, admire the fact that many of the structures, the houses, the mansions are still with us. Thanks to the Preservation Society and all people who regard history as essential. So that I admire. After a full century, we still recognize much of what Long Beach was originally. And if you want to talk in a more internal sense, we still have the sea, we still have the sand. As long as it doesn't rise much. But that's another issue. Even I can't stop the ocean. But anyway, we've had a great run of 100 years, and I'm certain we have a good, generous few decades ahead before we worry about other things. So,
Thank you so much, Senator
Yes.
Reynolds. And I'm planning on visiting Greenwood Cemetery, so I'll be there.
I'll be waiting.